Hello, in this video, I'm going to talk about what actually is occurring during action preparation. So as we've talked about in past videos, when we talk about reaction time, we can fractionate reaction time, meaning breaking it down into its component parts. So reaction time is made up of the premotor component and the motor component. The premotor component is the part of reaction time where the EMG signal in the muscle that would be activated for that action, the signal does not change yet because the motor commands haven't yet arrived at that muscle. The motor component occurs when the EMG signal starts to increase in that muscle because that muscle is activating and preparing to initiate the movement. So to clarify, reaction time takes place from the go signal or the stimulus until the start of the actual movement. So both the premotor and the motor component, there's no movement happening yet. This is still the spans of time before the movement has begun. So premotor component, no signal to the muscle yet. Motor component, there's a signal and the muscle is beginning to generate tension, but hasn't actually generated the movement quite yet. So in our context here of action preparation, essentially the action preparation is taking place during the premotor component. So during the space of time where there's no EMG signal in the muscle yet, that's the time where the nervous system is still processing the sensory information, the stimulus, and preparing the movement features required for the action based on the environmental context and the goal of the action. So all of the sort of computing and preparation for the action has taken place during the premotor component. And once those commands have been prepared, then they are sent to the muscle, and that's when the motor component begins. So the premotor component will increase when the complexity of the movement increases, when the movement velocity increases, or when the duration of the upcoming movement increases. So as the movement that we're preparing gets more complex, faster, or longer, that requires longer and more action preparation, which means that the premotor component is going to take longer. Postural preparation, that's also referred to as anticipatory postural adjustments. That's when muscles in different parts of the body, depending on what the activity is and the constraints of the movement, but that's when different muscles activate to maintain posture prior to an action in anticipation. So before the action has actually begun, different muscles in different parts of the body will activate to maintain posture. So like if I'm just sitting in this chair right now and I reach out to pick up my mug and bring it to my mouth to drink, before I even put my hand out, before I even reached out for my mug, I would have had postural muscles in different parts of my body on the opposite side from the direction the limb is going that have to activate to maintain my posture before I reach out. Because as soon as I reach out, I am shifting my center of mass in the direction that my arm is going. And we have to counteract that shift of center of mass by activating muscles on the opposite side. So that's postural preparation. That's not specific to any certain movements any certain muscles, any combination or timing. It is not specific. It can be different. Like even if I reach out and pick up my mug 10 times, I might activate my muscles differently each of those times. So it's really about just activating whatever muscles are required at any given moment, because it depends on the equilibrium needs of the task in that particular situation. Preparation of limb movement characteristics. So part of action preparation is the selection and organization of specific movement characteristics of the limb based on task constraints and characteristics. So like if we go back to me reaching for my coffee mug, that might be the action, but depending on the constraints and characteristics of the task, I need to prepare different limb movement characteristics. So maybe my cup is full of coffee, maybe it's empty, maybe I have to reach around something because there's something that's kind of obscuring my path. So we have to plan for, is a limb going to have to change direction? Are different limbs going in different directions? Like maybe it's an asymmetrical task where two arms are doing two different things. We plan for the trajectory of the limb, the limb will follow during the movement and the follow through after the movement, depending on what that movement is. Preparation of movements for object control. So if there's an object involved, like let's say my coffee mug, movement features related to controlling the object must also be prepared. So that means there will be more action preparation required for a movement that involves an object compared to the same movement without an object. One thing we have to control is force. So setting the amount of force required to lift or move the object. So we estimate how much force will be required. So like if I look at my coffee mug and I know roughly how much coffee is in it, then I can estimate the amount of force that will be required for me to successfully grasp and lift my coffee mug. If you don't know how much is in there, like let's say it's an opaque bottle and you can't see what is inside, you can estimate based on its size, and maybe you think it's full, you expect it to be full, so you'll estimate and control the amount of force based on your expectation of how much force will be required. But you may pick it up thinking it's full and use too much force because maybe it was actually empty. And that's where we use proprioception and our tactile senses to adjust and change the force setting essentially. But we start by anticipating, and that anticipation is part of our preparation for the action. End state comfort control is planning how we will grasp the object that will feel most comfortable to complete the action. So when we're using an object, we're interacting with an object, we prioritize the end state of how we will be holding or manipulating that object, as opposed to prioritizing the comfort or ease of the actual reach or movement leading up to interacting with the object. So like, for example, my coffee cup, it's on my table right next to me, and maybe I've got the handle facing in the other direction. Rather than the smoothest, most direct pathway to reach for the cup, since that's not going to get me to the handle, which is ultimately I want to hold the handle and drink from the cup, I'm going to do a weird reach. I might go at a weird trajectory that's not as direct as normal because I am executing this action with the end state of comfort in mind. So I might do a weird angle, or I might have to reach around something, maybe even use two hands and adjust the angle of the cup so that I can reach the handle. But the point is that we will move in all sorts of weird ways so that we end in a comfortable position in relation to that object. And so depending on what I want to do with the object, I might execute the entire action completely differently. So like maybe I just want to wipe underneath my cup. So maybe I want to lift it like this, and so I can wipe. Or maybe I want to drink from it and I want to grab it by the handle. And so depending on how I plan to interact with that object, I will, execute my entire action in totally different ways so that I end in a comfortable state with that object. Preparation of sequences of movements. So short sequences of movements are prepared in advance of the initial movement. So like typing, playing piano, speaking, these are all sort of continuous movements, so a series of many different movements, pressing every single key on the piano, each one is a movement. So these are really sequences of movements. So there's a systematic increase in reaction time as the movement complexity increases. And so as our series and sequence increases in complexity, it requires more and more reaction time. Kinematic characteristics of sequential movements are modified by elements of the sequence of movements that come before and after. So take playing piano, for instance. If you're going to play a series of notes or a series of keys, you will do that differently depending on what came before and what came after. So like maybe if it's just a series of 3 notes, you just go 1, 2, 3, with those fingers. But depending on what you played right before that and what you're planning to play right after that, you might play it with the other hand entirely or with different fingers, or, there's all sorts of ways that we might interact and complete the same exact action, but maybe not even with the same limb, depending on what came before and what is coming up after. And so we're preparing that as part of our action preparation in advance. Rhythmicity preparation. So rhythm characteristics sometimes need to be prepared in advance. So a lot of actions, a lot of movements that we engage in are rhythmic, whether we realize it or not. Gait and dance are clearly rhythmic, but also things like shooting a free throw. So there's a lot of things that have sort of a rhythm to it. Whether we necessarily are like counting to the beat, while we're playing golf or something, maybe not. But there are a lot of things that really are rhythmic in nature. And so that's where a lot of pre-performance rituals come in for different types of athletes or people who do certain types of movements in their profession, where right before that action, they might kind of get into the rhythm, and they might have a special little ritual that they go through where they're getting into the right rhythm to be able to successfully complete that action on rhythm. So those little rituals help stabilize the motor control system and orient the system to the rhythmic activity. So it's like, for example, the rhythm of stepping up for a golf swing to establish the 1-2 of the backswing and the front swing. So like if you're thinking 1-2, 1-2, and then backswing, forward swing, so it's like different athletes in different sports or professions have sort of these different pre-performance rituals. It could be like dribbling on rhythm right before a free throw to kind of get the rhythm down, so to help with the timing of the action that you're about to complete. Now, what's interesting is routines are extremely different from one individual to another because it depends on what works for that person and what they've kind of developed in practice. But those routines are extremely consistent from one task, no, not one task, from one trial to another. So like somebody is shooting free throws, they might have the exact same performance ritual each time they shoot that free throw, and it might be different from the next person, but they're going to do that the same way for each time they complete that action. And when somebody else tries to impose something on that pre-performance ritual, like make it longer, make it shorter, make them do something differently, that can interfere with the person's success in completing that action afterward. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.